fall of 1907. In the twilight of the autumn sky, as the sun sank into crimson clouds, Ben Carter set foot in the small Indiana town of Bunsay. A former New York City police officer, and now a private investigator, he had come here at the invitation of his old friend, Sheriff Daniel Green. The friend asked for help in investigating not a simple criminal case, but a more mysterious and mystical story. Ben put on his hat, breathing in the cold air. A small breeze brought the smells of dampness and decay that were typical of this time of year. The town looked quiet, but Carter could feel the tension, as if the very air was saturated with anxiety. He quickly reached the sheriff's office, where Daniel Green was waiting for him. He was a short man with tired eyes and a thick mustache that was beginning to turn gray. The sheriff shook Ben's hand with obvious relief. "It's good to see you, Ben." "Thank you for coming," the sheriff said, inviting Carter to sit down. "What's going on here, Daniel?" Ben asked, looking at the stack of documents on the table. "It's all very strange," Green began. "There's been some strange things happening in the neighborhood lately. The weather has been deteriorating, cattle are dying en masse, fields of grain are burning, and the local young estate owner, Elizabeth Dunhill, is accused of witchcraft." "Witchcraft?" In our time, Ben was surprised. Yes, she is accused by a local landowner, Colin Hughes. He wanted to buy Elizabeth's estate, but she refused. Now he's inciting the locals against her. Ben bowed his head and rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "So there are other motives behind all this. Perhaps old family sins that have finally decided to resurface. Well, we need to find out. Where is Elizabeth now?" "She is at her estate, guarded by a few of my men. The local sentiment is very hostile, and I fear they may try to commit a lynching." Ben nodded. "Good, let's go to her. We need to talk to her and this Hughes guy." Elizabeth Dunhill's estate stood on a hill surrounded by dense forest. The large but somewhat abandoned building looked eerie in the gloomy autumn twilight. Two armed men were on duty at the gate and let Ben and Daniel in. Elizabeth met them in the spacious living room. She was a frail 20-something with large green eyes that reflected fatigue and anxiety. She greeted them in a soft voice and invited them to sit down. "Miss Dunhill," Ben began, "tell us what's going on." "I don't know why it all started," Elizabeth said, nervously fidgeting with the hem of her dress. "I tried to keep the estate in order, but things just got worse. And now these accusations. Do you know Colin Hughes?" Ben asked. "Yes. He wanted to buy my estate, but I refused. He has always been intrusive and aggressive. Do you have any enemies, Miss Dunhill? Anyone who might wish you harm?" Daniel interjected. Elizabeth thought about it, then shook her head. "No, at least I don't know of any such people." Ben stood up, walking to the window and peering out into the darkness. "This is all very strange. Something is not right here. We need to learn more about this area and its people. Maybe the history of this place holds the answer." Later that evening, Ben and Daniel met with Colin Hughes at his large house on the other side of town. Hughes was a tall man with a predatory stare and arrogant manner. He made no secret of his animosity toward Elizabeth. "She's a witch, and everyone knows it," Hughes said when Ben asked about his accusations. "Everything has been going wrong since she got here. Do you have any proof?" Ben asked, looking directly into Hughes' eyes. "All these events speak for themselves, and people can see it. Or maybe you just want to take her estate," Daniel suggested. "That's nonsense," Hughes exclaimed. "She's dangerous, and I'm looking out for the safety of the town." Ben and Daniel left Hughes' house. exchanging thoughtful glances. "That man is hiding something," Ben said. "We need to check his background and connections." The next day, Ben and Daniel began investigating, visiting locals and gathering information. They learned that Hughes had a long-standing conflict with the Dunhill family. His grandfather had once lost a large plot of land to Elizabeth's father in a poker game, and the families had been at odds ever since. At the same time, the town itself was filled with anxiety. The locals were friendly, but their eyes were cold and distrustful. They whispered hostilely to each other as soon as Ben and Daniel left. Ben felt that the people were hiding something important. In the evening, Ben and Daniel went to the old cemetery, where strange lights and shadows were rumored to be seen. They were walking between the old gravestones with lanterns when they suddenly heard footsteps behind them. They turned around and saw a figure in a long cloak. "Who's there?" Daniel shouted, but the figure disappeared into the darkness. "It could be someone watching us," Ben whispered. "We have to be careful." That night, when Ben returned to the hotel where he was staying, he found a note under the door. "You are on the right track. Look for the answer in the old church." The next day, Ben and Daniel went to an abandoned church on the outskirts of town. It was old and abandoned, but there were old books and documents inside. Looking through them, Ben found an old diary that belonged to Elizabeth's ancestor. It described long-standing family conflicts, particularly with the Hughes family, and also mentioned curses and secret rituals. Ben realized that all this was not just a coincidence. Old sins and curses committed generations ago had finally begun to bear fruit. For centuries, these family secrets had been accumulating, forming something sinister and invisible. The diary mentioned an ancient rite performed by one of the Dunhill family's ancestors. The ritual was meant to protect the estate from evil forces, but something went wrong, and a curse has haunted the family ever since. Back at Elizabeth's estate, Ben decided to spend the night in her library, where family heirlooms and old documents were stored. Together with Elizabeth and Daniel, they explored every page, every artifact in search of an answer. Late at night, when the clock struck midnight, they came across an old map of the estate, which showed an underground tunnel leading to the place where the same rite was said to have been performed. "This could be the key," Ben said, pointing to the map. "See? If we find this place, maybe we can stop what's happening." The next morning, they set out for the location. The tunnel was dark and damp, its walls covered with moss and cobwebs. They moved slowly, carefully examining each step. Finally, they reached an old underground hall. Strange symbols were carved on its walls, and on the floor was a large circle of stone used for the ritual. "This is where it all began," Daniel whispered. "And this is where it must end," Ben added, lighting a lantern. "We have to destroy this place, but first we have to find a way to break the curse." As they began to examine the hall, strange sounds emerged from the darkness. The cloaked figure they had seen earlier appeared at the entrance to the hall. It was Colin Hughes, with a crazy glint in his eye. "You think you can stop this?" he exclaimed. "This place and this curse belong to me, to my family. I will restore our power." Ben rushed toward Hughes, trying to stop him, but he was fast and agile. The two of them tackled each other, fighting for control of the lantern. Daniel and Elizabeth tried to help, but the darkness and chaos made it difficult. Finally, Ben managed to break free of Hughes' grip and knock him down. At this point, Elizabeth picked up the lantern and directed its light at the symbols on the walls. "We have to destroy this place," she shouted. Daniel found a heavy stone and began to break the symbols on the floor. The stone was splitting, and with each blow it seemed that some evil was coming out of the hall, slowly evaporating into darkness. Hughes, seeing that he was losing everything, rushed to Ben with his last strength, screaming, but he pushed him away with all his might. Colin fell on a broken stone. A dull sound was heard, and he fell silent and did not move. The hall was gradually filled with silence. The curse was broken, and with it all the evil forces that accompanied it disappeared. Ben, Elizabeth, and Daniel, tired but alive, made it to the surface. The next day, the sun reappeared in the town. The animosity and tension that had prevailed among the locals gradually began to disappear. Elizabeth was saved, and with her, her estate and her future. Ben Carter, returning to New York, felt satisfied with the task he had accomplished. He knew that justice had been served, and that he had made a mark in this small corner of Indiana. But somewhere in the depths of his soul, a shadow of doubt remained. Can all the secrets of this world be revealed? Or maybe some of them are better left alone. He had no answer to this question, but he was ready to face the new challenges and mysteries that lay ahead.